Now, the government's long-awaited planning reforms are being announced in Parliament as we speak. They are reworked from the draft National Planning Policy Framework, what a mouthful, which was published last summer. Many countryside groups were angry at the proposal, so let's have a look at what we can expect. Ministers want to simplify more than 1,000 pages of planning regulations by cutting them to around 50 pages. Whitehall sources have said it's an unashamedly pro-growth document designed to speed up planning decisions. So at the heart of the framework is a presumption in favour of sustainable development, which ministers say will boost growth, but doesn't harm communities, the environment or the countryside. This phrase is thought to be in the new document, despite criticism from countryside campaigners. They fear it'll mean developments are automatically approved unless there's a specific local objection. They also wanted clarification on what a sustainable development is. Whitehall sources have told the BBC that the necessary safeguards will be there, and ministers are said to be confident that enough assurances are in place. David Thompson is on College Green and can give us some more detail. David.
Hi Joe, that's right. Greg Clark, the Planning Minister, is outlining this document to Parliament even as we speak. And to be honest with you, this isn't the government's first stab at this. This document's been through a number of drafts and revisions in an attempt to get that balance between protecting the countryside and also giving the green light to growth. Right. And I'm joined by two of the protagonists in that debate, Adam Royal from the Campaign to Protect Rural England and Liz Peace from the British Property Federation even. Now, if we just ask you first, Adam, it seems as if a number of safeguards have been put back into the document. Are you reassured that the countryside will be protected?
Well, when the draft framework was published in July, we were very concerned it would deliver a development at all costs approach, and we were concerned about that. We think there are certainly some serious revisions need to be made to the document when it's published in its final form today. And there's been speculation that some welcome changes will be made, particularly on the issue of open countryside, protecting the wider countryside. It's in current planning policy, it wasn't in the draft. If it's back in the final framework, we'll be very happy. Also, very important that brownfield first, the presumption in favour of developing brownfield sites is back in the final document. Local councils need to be given time to put new frameworks, new plans in place when the framework comes into play as well. So lots to come out in the wash, I think.
Watch this space.
The detail.
Now, Liz, if I can just ask you, I mean, the government says this document will be unashamedly pro-growth. Now, that has to mean that more houses will be built on more green land. I mean, in layman's terms, this is a fill your boots charter for your members, isn't it?
Well, no, not necessarily. I mean, if our people actually need somewhere to live, then I think we need to build houses. So I don't think there's any problem with having a planning system that provides for growth. Good development that works. Of course, you shouldn't have just sort of, unmitigated development all over the place, anywhere where anybody chooses to build. You have to have a system of control, but you need to make it a simple, straightforward, efficient system to plan for the growth where we need it.
And Liz has got a point there, that the old system was 1,000 pages. It was a huge document. Surely, whatever your concerns about the new regime is, it's got to be better than the old one, which I assume will only be missed by NIMBYs and property lawyers.
Well, we had no problem with clarifying the planning guidance, bringing it down into a shorter document, but things seem to have been missed along the way by the government, whether intentionally or otherwise. But we are in favour of the right kind of development in the right places. We know that there's a shortage of affordable housing in rural areas. What we were concerned about was that the framework as it was drafted wouldn't deliver the right sort of houses in the right places. It would just end up being greenfield development, executive homes, where developers will make most profit.
OK, well, thank you both very much indeed for that. Now, this document is designed to remove some of the complexity from the planning process. I'm willing to bet you it doesn't remove the controversy. See you later.
I think you might be right there. Well, let's pick up on some of those issues with the panel. John Prescott, looking at this issue of building on brownfield sites first, well, that was in, I think, in the original document. I mean, there hasn't been a change.
When they got rid of 1,000 pages of 50, it wasn't complexities we worried about, it was the controls to stop the developing industry going to greenfield sites. They'll now go there, frankly. They've already made the applications under the old bill.
So do you think they will still go to those greenfield sites? They won't then...
Well, let's put it like this. I said the requirement, you had to look for brownfield sites where they were in the cities. Now they're saying it's up for growth, but he hasn't mentioned growth there. Growth must have the importance over sustainability.
And do you agree with that?
They have taken out the requirement. So we increased the brownfield and building and houses on it from 60% to 70% houses went on it. We had more greenfield sites. This is about removing controls and giving the developers a chance to build in greenfield sites.
Is that a good thing to promote growth?
Well, I'm all for growth, but you can build houses in the city. That's why the 10 cities, according to a report of our time, improved, because they can building in the cities and stop the building going in suburbia. This is a suburbia charter, a developer's charter. It's about money. It's not about growth.
Well, that must be worrying for you, John Foster. How are you going to explain that to your constituents?
I'd be deeply worried if John was right, but we're sitting here not having seen the paper, so it's a bit difficult.
But we had the original one.
But we had the original one, and we then had the consultation. There were two key things that people were concerned about. One was the business about were the protections strong enough in terms of protecting the green belt and ensuring that you had brownfield development had to come first, the so-called sequential test. I understand that's now there. And the second big concern was the fact that many local authorities hadn't got their local plans sorted out, and therefore they wouldn't be able to use those for local concerns. I understand that there's now going to be a year-long break so that local councils can get them right, and that can give local people control over what happens.
Do you agree with Simon Walker from the Institute of Directors, who's called opponents to these reforms NIMBYs? It is all about, I don't want it in my backyard.
Well, there's always going to be NIMBYism, and, you know, we've probably all been guilty of it ourselves. But, I mean, the crucial thing is we've just had a conversation about the need for more homes. We need to have particularly more affordable homes. We need to make land available for that, and the planning system at the moment does restrict the opportunity to do it. So the question is, can you get the balance right between sustainability on the one hand and protecting the environment on the other?
You're reassured?
Well, I haven't seen the paper, but from what I'm told and what I understand, I think that those controls are now very firmly in place in the document.
I mean, is this the right time, Norman Fowler, to be picking a fight with a sort of core vote for the Conservative Party? Because there are very strong and have been very strong campaigns against this. The National Trust, the Daily Telegraph are against this, in principle.
Well, if we're going to concrete over the whole of the Green Belt, they've got every justification for being so. I mean, they're against also the high-speed rail link as well. So, I mean, you've got to make some decisions in this. I mean, I happen to agree with what John was saying about brownfield sites. I mean, I think that even I represented for 30 years a constituency on the boundaries of Birmingham, and what was quite clear is that people much preferred, the builders much preferred coming there and actually expanding into the green field rather than actually building in the very apparent and evident brownfield sites that you had in Birmingham. And from going back to Birmingham, it seems to me that many of those brownfield sites still exist.
But there is still going to be a fear that if there is a presumption in favour of sustainable development, so unless there is a specific objection, there will be a bit of a carte blanche for builders to go where they like because of the pressure for housing and for building hospitals and schools, which is, you know, quite legitimate.
Yeah, but you've got, yes, and there are going to be some tough decisions. For example, in some villages, I think you probably, at the moment, you have a situation where people just can't get houses at all. So you're probably going to have to expand those houses. There's no point in trying to duck this issue. There are no easy solutions there.
But one of the contradictions is the government want localism, and they say they're going to leave the decision to the local areas. Well, we know the groups that are going to come up in our constituencies, and they'll have a ballot on it, and they won't want those housing. Then it's supposed to be decided in the area. They're against it. It'll become to Mr. Pickles, who's going to have to make the decision then. And, you know, when you talk about people looking at the Tories, it was Mr. Pickles who was sitting down with all the developers and accused them of not declaring it, and he's the man who said it was a personal meal. Look, there's a combination going on between money, developers and this government, and we've seen this week why it is.
And that is the problem,
hang on,
because
John.
we've had Francis Maude in 2010 campaigning against 100 new affordable homes. Grant Shapps, the housing minister, campaigning against. I mean, isn't that what happens?
He campaigns against everything.
Let's not pick on Grant Shapps.
John's not going to get away with this. The Labour government, which he supported, imposed housing targets on each local authority that in many cases were completely completely nonsensical. There was no ability to even build those houses, and it would have required going into the green belt to do this. What this does is it matches, I hope, the ability of getting on with being able to build the much needed houses on the one hand and the other protecting the environment. If we can get that balance right, which I hope it will do, without all the bureaucracy.
Take the southeast. We wanted to increase houses in the southeast so youngsters could live where their families are, and we increased it by 200,000, right? There were screams and shouts of it, but we showed you could build it in the same density of housing with the same amount of land that we have for 900,000. Right. So you could do that if you want to.
You can if you go onto brownfields, which is what local councils will do.
Told to go up north. You can't
word, and then we're ending this.
I just think it's critically important that we pick up what Norman said. I happen to know that John believes it as well, because he used to do it when he was in charge, is that we have to have an assumption that brownfields are where you have to do the first development before you go anywhere else.
All right.
End of story.
That's it. At the end of this month, it's bye-bye COI.